There's no way, I didn't do it, you wouldn't have done it. There's no way to predict the mix of politics and football today. And that's because there is no way to predict the dominance, which is weird for me, but there's no other way to put it. There's no way to predict the dominance of your, people of Texas, your lovable, likable, cuddly United States Senator Rafael Cruz. I've never had a segment that mentions Rafael Cruz so often. I'm positive of that. Now, there's a lot to this. It weaves its way through sports. It weaves its way through some politics. It weaves its way through some legal issues, and then it weaves its way into absolute cheesiness. Ted Cruz, Rafael is his real name, just so you know. He is named after his dad, who, according to the great historian Donald Trump, was part of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Okay? That's what the historian Donald Trump says. First, Ted Cruz has gone public with his love and belief in legal protections of college athletes. I don't know. I'm going to say this up front so you don't think that I'm, because anytime I do anything or say anything remotely political, which is often, I get shut up woke Jeff or shut up liberal or something like that. So let me help some of you out there that are always looking for agendas. I don't know that I disagree with what the lovable United States Senator is saying. I think I might agree. The problem is I don't know what he's advocating. I don't know what he's advocating other than this. My name is Ted. This is what I think he's doing. I'm Ted, and I'm on a mission to be cooler than I really am. That's what I think the primary focus is. But I don't know what he's really doing. No, let me take that back. I do know the bigger argument here. I just can't tell you specifically why he's writing about college football and why he is acting as if he's got all sorts of solutions for college football, other than the basic takeaway that is, I need to do something cool and sound cool to the people of Texas, so I'm going to act like I really care a lot about college sports. And then I think there's another bigger political reason for doing it. In an op-ed today, of which 90% of people walking around today have no idea what that even means. In an op-ed today, the very likable senator wrote, you can find this at statesman.com. This weekend, Texas football teams will begin their seasons with legitimate playoff aspirations. That's because college sports, like everything else, are bigger in Texas. Man, that's a good one, Ted. Good start. What a great lead. You are cool. College sports are a great cultural unifier, but they are in peril. Not just our fans, but for thousands of student athletes whose games won't air on national television. I don't want to say this again. I know a lot about what I'm talking about when it comes to the bureaucracy of college sports. I don't know what he's advocating. I don't. And I don't know that I can disagree with him because I have no idea what he's trying to say. If we are to preserve college athletics as we know it, congressional action will be necessary. To understand what lawmakers should and should not do, the response of Washington to football's first crisis is instructive. All right, I'll just keep going. I don't think Ted, who's a very bright guy and a legal scholar, who I believe at a political level has to pretend to be dumb, and I'll show you examples of that later, don't worry. I don't think he knows anything about what he is trying to advocate here, and I don't think that he cares. He just wants to say, I'm Ted, I want to talk about college football because it makes me sound cooler. All right, so he says, like many fans, I shudder at the idea of a congressional oversight hearing on what is roughing the passer. A Justice Department probe into particular coaches' methods or federally mandated water and safety breaks. Oh, you, Ted, you're nutty. After speaking with athletes, stakeholders from numerous Texas schools, collegiate sports associations, and others, I developed a draft legislation that preserves the self-governance model and provides limited federal involvement to fully understand the outstanding legal issues that undermine fair competition. That sounds awfully righteous, and he addresses none of it. First, he says, my model codifies NIL rights for college athletes. As a matter of first principle, a man or woman is entitled to profit from their own labor and success. Despite this early success, Texas institutions could find themselves at a competitive disadvantage against out-of-state rivals by the actions of another state legislature. A national solution for a national market is needed, the lovable senator writes, which is why the Texas state legislature requested in its NIL law, quote, the United States Congress act on this matter to ensure the competitive integrity of intercollegiate athletics. The bill also allows athletic associations to create an NIL database so athletes and their representatives can better understand a player's market value. Can I stop there? He has no idea what he's talking about, and neither do most other people, because there is no market. It's a slush fund. It is not a market forces, supply and demand. It's governed by nothing other than rich men handing you money. It's grifting. It's just handouts. But we'll pretend otherwise. He writes, finally, the bill would ensure athletes are not deemed employees for purposes of employment law. This provision is essential to preserve the idea that student athletes are students first, and the focus remains on the idea that student athletes remain on focus for education. It would protect scholarship students so they could not be fired for non-performance. Do we decide, and he finishes by writing, do we decide to take the path of creating a new federal agency and co-commitment regulation of college sports, as well as the hyper-politicization that would soon follow, or do we want to preserve the self-governance model that Roosevelt and others chose more than 100 years ago? I prefer the latter, writes the lovable Ted Cruz. Okay, is he wrong? No, it's fluff. Okay, let's be clear. It's fluff. It's fluff. I don't know that he's wrong. Look, Ted could write the law. He could, but he has to pretend to be, cooler than he really is. No, they should not be employees. I'd have no idea what he's trying to say. This database about a marketplace is laughable. So let me give you an idea that what this is really about. What he's advocating is, I'm not quite sure. If he's saying the sports needs revenue sharing and a commissioner, I agree. If you don't know what I think should be done with college sports, go back and listen to the podcast in which I said 16 things need to change the sport. None of which will be done, and none of which he's advocating. But he's not saying enough where I can sit here and criticize his flowery language. Okay? He doesn't really say anything. But I believe what he's trying to do is insert himself because Southern Republicans have inserted themselves. Now, this part I do think is important to watch. I do think it's interesting. And I don't know that I completely blame him, by the way. And I want you whiners who think I'm only going to pick on him because he's a Republican, I want you to listen clearly. I'm not saying that he's wrong. He's inserting himself because others have inserted themselves. And in Republican politics, college football is NASCAR. College football is NASCAR. So I believe that's why Ted is here. Other Republicans in the South have inserted themselves. SEC schools who are represented by Tommy Tuberville. For full disclosure, I believe that he is a moron, an absolute moron. Okay? My opinion. But Tommy Tuberville inserted himself because of the very reason Ted Cruz just inserted himself. Tommy Tuberville is looking out for Southern schools that don't have the alumni base nor the money to compete in a slush fund handout world against the University of Texas and Texas A&M. That's why Tommy Tuberville is there. Two reasons. One, college football is NASCAR. So he needs to be there because that's what people will vote on. Number two, the Southern schools are saying, you better help us out, Washington, because Texas is just going to own the whole planet because they have more money than anyone else. I believe Ted Cruz just inserted himself to say, I'm here too to look out for your interests. So in the end, what's going to happen, I predict, is that Ted Cruz is going to say, Washington, you leave Texas alone. Leave him alone. The reason why he's going to say, when he says he's interviewed stakeholders, that means rich men. That's what that means. And the rich men don't want anyone to touch the handouts, the slush fund, the Lamborghinis, the Aston Martins, all the thing that Texas and Texas A&M can do. They want protection. They don't want Tommy Tuberville representing a bunch of Southern schools that don't have the marketplace power that Texas does or A&M does. Okay? They're trying to get in there and say, don't let them hand out Aston Martins. I believe Ted Cruz is inserting himself to say, don't worry, Texas, don't worry, A&M. I got your back on this so you can hand out all the Aston Martins and Lamborghinis you want. That's, I think, is the big macro political issue here. And it's pretty interesting because it's basically Republicans in the South going at each other. So I think Ted felt the need, and I don't know that he's wrong, felt the need to insert himself and say, don't worry, Texas and A&M, I'm here. The irony, of course, is that Ted Cruz would spend a bulk of his time calling UT woke, Austin woke, and he would be calling you names. But now that it's politically popular, guess what? Ted is waving his arms and saying, don't worry, I'll look out for you. That's what I think is happening here. I think it is mostly imagery. I think it is posturing, and I don't think he's wrong. Because I think he wants to send the message to Southern Republicans who are trying to stop Texas from just handing out gobs of money, which they will. Okay, no one's going to stop them. Don't worry. You don't need Ted Cruz. They've got plenty of power. The richest school in the world will not stop at anything to buy football players. Got it? And I think Ted mostly is going to protect that, although he didn't say yes or no. There's that part. If you read and hear something different, I offer it up. I'm happy to hear another side to this. I don't think there really is a side except just what I said, is that Ted wants to say, I'm inserting myself. I got your back. No one will stop your slush funds. Don't worry. The Lamborghinis can go to anyone you want. And there's Tommy Tuberville saying, all we have is a Ford Focus. Those rich guys are going to buy up all the marketplace, and football is NASCAR, and NASCAR is important in the South, and I need to be here too. That's the political argument. Part two of Ted. Oh, my. Oh, my. Oh, my gosh. How did Ted take over my show? How did Rafael Cruz take over the day in such bizarre ways? Here you go. So I'm now going to ask what I believe is a very obvious question that is going to take listener participation, and that is, is this Ted's worst performance ever? Or best? I'm sorry, I got all screwed up there. Could this be Ted's best performance ever? To most reasonable people, for just a second, most reasonable people, and I would say probably most not reasonable people, think Ted Cruz is the most insufferable fake person you can think of. I know reasonable people think that, and I think unreasonable people might think that as well. Ted can't utter a sentence, in my opinion, and have anyone think he's sincere. Honestly, can we agree on that? You don't believe anything he says is sincere, do you? As Donald Trump, the great philosopher, Winston Churchill of our time once said, nobody likes Ted. Right, nobody likes Ted. So that's why we have to grade his performance. Ted, it's pretty fascinating. It really is. So somewhere there's a production team, and they sit around. And I don't know if Ted has the ideas or if the production team has the ideas. I don't know how the brainstorming happens. I really don't know how they arrive at some of these Ted performances, because I believe they're performances, and I think you do too, because nobody thinks he's ever sincere. So they sit around, they come up with performances. Now, if you're to say, well, it's working, Jeff, you're talking about him, if you want to use that argument, I guess so. I don't think it's a good thing, by the way, but if you want to say I'm talking about him, no doubt, more than ever before, is Ted owning my show. I would submit to you in really bad ways, because I'm about to make fun of him for the next 15 minutes straight, and I think you will too. Okay, so is this... It's the obvious question. Is this Ted's best or worst performance Then I'm going to make, you may disagree, I don't care, a not so obvious observation. Okay? And if you disagree with my comment that most reasonable and unreasonable people think he's the most insufferably fake person you could ever imagine, you can argue with me about that too. I don't think that's a big debate. So the production team gets together and they come up with performances, I think. Question: is it his best performance or his worst performance of his long political career? And it's long and probably going to continue to be long. Nothing beats, my opinion, in grading Ted's performances, nothing beats his escape to Cancun during the winter storm that was killing people. Nothing beats that performance. Right? Remember, only days later, we see Ted handing out water like he works for the Peace Corps or something, right? His spin on why he had to travel to Cancun is the places where we're freezing to death. He travels to Cancun. His explanation was priceless. I had to travel to and from with my kids, because that's just what people do, right? Now I'm going to go back to this. I think that's his worst, but this is up for debate, like you're part of the Academy Awards or something. Is this Ted's worst performance?
They're trying to go after and regulate ceiling fans. I got to tell you, it's hot in Texas. We don't want to get rid of our ceiling fans. And now these idiots have come out and said, drink 2 beers a week. That's their guideline. Well, I got to tell you, if they want us to drink 2 beers a week, frankly, they can kiss my ass.
No, okay. Senator, I brought a beer to drink with you. I'll drink this non-alcoholic beer with you because I'm not allowed to drink on camera, but I'll have a sip in the meantime.
Look, I got to say, have you ever seen a brand do more damage to itself than Bud Light, which single-handedly seem to destroy themselves? So I'm glad you're not drinking a Bud Light. Personally, I'm fond of Shiner Bock, which is a good Texas brand. I've been to the Shiner Brewery in Shiner, Texas, and I recommend it. And I promise you, this is not alcohol-free beer down here.
No, and by the way, the one I have right after.
Wow. Okay. Well, here we go. All right. Is that his worst performance of all time? There's so much to that. There's so much to unpack in that. It is, as usual, it's laughable. Now, I do have a serious point. Here's my serious point about this. If you've thrown up on your shoes, it's fine. It's fine. You should probably throw up on your shoes. Does Ted or his acting coach or his marketing team think reasonable people believe him in that they kiss my ass and they're going to legislate 2 beers a week? Do you believe that his acting coach and Ted even think reasonable people fall for that stuff? I don't know that answer. I'm going to assume probably not, but the answer is, now get ready for this part, the answer is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you, the reasonable thinking human beings, are throwing up on your shoes. It doesn't matter that I'm making fun of him. It really doesn't matter. So whether they think it's going to work, whether they think that you're buying this stuff, he's hanging out at some country bar with a bunch of fat dudes behind him, they have so much in common with. I'm sure all those guys went to Ivy League schools as well. You do know Ted's never been to a public school, right? Like all those guys behind him from Copenhagen. They all went to they're all from Tomball. Ted went to Tomball High School. Do you know that? The man has had nothing but an Ivy League education, and his kids are the same. But it doesn't matter. Right? I mean, when you laugh and you throw up on your shoes and you go, are you kidding me, buddy? Really? You planned this? Your acting coach put this together for you? Here's why it doesn't matter. Because human thinking people can make fun of it all day long. And it won't matter. Ted knows, and I believe his handlers know, maybe even his acting coach, whoever that is, they know you're not watching Newsmax. Who's watching Newsmax at 2 in the afternoon? Really? That's not you. I'm pretty sure it's not. If it is, I'm going to make fun of you. So it's possible, although I don't even think they think a knucklehead watching Newsmax at 2 p.m. would believe this. But the reality is you don't matter. I mean, that I think is sort of the hard takeaway to this is that he at the end of the day he doesn't care that I'm making fun of him because the Newsmax crowd is cool with it, and the Newsmax crowd lives in an echo chamber. So does everybody else. So they're fine with it. His cracking, kiss my ass. I think he was wearing a belt buckle as if he just won, like a bull riding competition or something. It worked. It worked for Newsmax at 2 in the afternoon. This is performance art of the worst kind, but it's performance art of the worst kind for someone other than most of you, or people with a job and something to do at 2 in the afternoon who are probably not 80 years old and living in some rural town. Okay? They're fine with it. The rest of us can make fun of it, and it won't impact him at all. Because you and that Newsmax person most likely share nothing in common, just like Ted shares nothing in common with them either, including your media habits. So we can make fun of it all day long. It's not going to derail him at all. Even if I were to say to Ted, while he's wearing the belt buckle, while I'm sure he's hanging around the line dance that evening, made fun of him all day, he knows at the end, you're not my audience. Somebody on their couch at 2 p.m. watching Newsmax is cool with it. So let's make fun of him. How about a little buy and sell? Let's do that. It's a Friday. Got a lot of Ted Cruz here. We'll do buy and sell with Ted. You ready? Buy or sell?
Buy or freaking sell.
Ted Cruz drinks more than 2 beers per day. You're going to scream back. Okay. Ted Cruz drinks more than 1 beer a week. No, a month. 5 years. He's Mr. Shinerbach, right? Yeah. There you go. That wasn't a prop, was it? All right, buy or sell?
Buy or freaking sell.
Ted Cruz goes, I don't know what night, let's assume Thursday or Friday. Ted Cruz goes every week to the country bar or stage. Let's assume it's really a bar, but it's probably a stage somewhere. But to the country bar where he made this Newsmax infomercial. Buy or sell, he goes there every single week to line dance. They hang out with the guys behind him that all went to Harvard too. Those guys that are props behind him who they all drank their beer at the same time he did. Those guys, his friends. Buy or sell?
Buy or freaking sell.
Ted Cruz line dances by himself. Is he not the guy? Is he not? First of all, I want you to stab me in the neck if I ever line dance. I can't think of anything worse in life than line dancing, but I feel like Ted Cruz might be off on the side line dancing by himself. That's what I think. Remember, Ted Cruz, in my world, you always use dodgeball comparisons. He's the chubby kid with a button down at Topsiders that sucks, but you hit him in the face and he cries. He's that guy. I think he might be the country version of that in line dancing. Buy or sell?
Buy or freaking sell.
There's no alcohol in that Shiner Bock that he lifted up. There's no beer in it at all. Buy or sell? It's water. Or tea. Or what would Ted have? A Shirley Temple?
Sweet tea.
Sweet tea. Ted. Buy or sell?
Buy or freaking sell.
Because Ted's from Tomball and all, and he knows, he hangs out in Pasadena and all that stuff. Ted Cruz can name more than 3 songs on the Urban Cowboy soundtrack. Buy or sell? Buy or sell? Last one. Buy or sell? Ted hung around with the dudes in the background and drank a beer with them.